I mean, it actually took some use to, from being on my own to fitting into the family environment and the dynamics of so many things going on around me, you know, kids and organisation and so much happening that I would find myself becoming overwhelmed by it all, and I would have to have my little space to go to for my, you know, just my own sanity, because my mind is just blowing. And yeah, I just had to have my own little space, and you know, I've found that I really sort of struggled in that family environment, and things, you know, went wrong. We moved house to the south coast and found a place to rent, and you know, I wasn't really mentally very well, and I mean, I would go off to the doctors and have these long conversations that I really needed help, and the advice always, even when they put me onto mental health services, was, oh well, if you feel like that, you can go and have a walk around the block, or go and have a nice long relaxing bath. And I would walk out of doctor's surgeries and other clinics in tears, because I felt that I needed help, and the kind of advice they were giving me was just ridiculous. They didn't understand me at all. They didn't understand the stuff that was going on in my head at that time, and I just couldn't. Again, I couldn't trust anybody. I couldn't even trust the professionals. So all this just sort of built up and built up and built up. And then, because I was on housing benefit at that time, the council, for whatever reason, missed paying the rent to the landlord. And no matter what we did, we struggled with it. We were just evicted because the landlord had no option. And he said, well, look, if I evict you, then at least, you know, they'll rehouse you. So with that, we did, you know, we agreed to get evicted. And the council at that time had to put us into temporary accommodation. Miles away from where we were, you know, about 10 or 12 miles, but you know, far enough away. And you know that her two children lost touch with their friends, and they had to settle into a new house, and they didn't know anybody, and there had to be new schools, and still the council wouldn't accept any responsibility. It was never their fault, you know. And the pressure that put on us was pretty horrendous, because even my partner at the time, you know, couldn't make the place our own, because we had no idea how long we were going to be there. We were told that, you know, if it was found we made ourselves intentionally homeless, that they wouldn't be able to help us at all. And yet it was their fault. They wouldn't admit it. And one day I was downstairs doing something, and I heard my son crying up on the landing, crying his eyes out, and he couldn't get into his room. That's what happens, because I went upstairs, and he was clearly upset. He was only 18 months old. He didn't know what was going on. And I tried the door, wouldn't budge. And what was of even more concern to me was that his, if you like, half-brother, step-brother, was on the other side of that door, and could have been in a difficult situation himself. So I had to think about, my one on the outside and the other one on the other side of the door. So I pushed and pushed and didn't get the door open. And I thought, right, well, I've got to do something. So I booted the door. What I didn't realise at the time was that the other child, who was 3.5, 4, was actually behind the door, sort of wedging it with something. For himself, even just, stretched out like that. So, of course, when I kicked the door, he just went flying and ended up on the bed. And I went in, and in order to get eye contact, I held him like this so he'd look at me, and asked him what he was doing, and told him it was, he shouldn't be doing stuff like that. And I didn't know, what was going on, and my son was outside crying, and he could have been in danger on the other side. Lasted all of about a minute and a half. My son got back into the room that they were sharing, went back downstairs and did whatever I did that evening. Watched the telly, went to bed, got up, and went out the following morning. And I no sooner got home later in the day than the police arrived, and I was arrested for assault on a child. I wasn't allowed back into the house. I wasn't, for the time allowed to even to see my own son. But fortunately, my partner at the time was absolutely brilliant, and against everybody else's advice, and she took the risk of sort of meeting me in the park, and I was playing with my son, and everything else was fine, but I wasn't allowed in the house, or her, or the other children, or anything. And I was in a mess. My world just fell apart, because the only family I felt I ever had, proper family, was suddenly lost, and my mental health became even worse. And I think this went on for, 2-3 months or something before it went to court. And I really was I was holding it together, but I was still quite ill. Seriously ill, and it did result in me actually being taken in and being put on a section for my own health and safety. They had no choice. And my world just fell apart. Everything I wanted, and my son, and even though I struggled with the whole sort of family environment, I'd lost everything. I'd failed, and that was really, really difficult. And then I, went to court eventually, and I was given probation. That was a struggle, to get that, but I did. And it was very difficult being on my, even being on my own again was one thing, but being without my little boy tore me apart, and I sort of slowly died internally from then on. But on the other side of the coin, I was with a housing association. They were keen for volunteers, and I put myself up for election, and I became a board member, and everybody was wonderful, and they were supportive towards me, and I got projects through, and it did so much for my confidence to have that opportunity and to learn about management of a very large company with £80 million in assets, and being there, making kind of those decisions, that was offset my mental health stuff in a way, but I was still very ill. But the world was still falling apart. And then my ex-partner, got into another relationship, and I'd phone up every week, and my son would say, "Well," I'd say, "What are you doing this weekend?" "Oh, I'm going off to my dad's." "Oh, okay, then, what time are we meeting?" "No, my dad's." So then I felt a complete failure. I'd not only lost my home and everything else, but it felt that I was losing my son to somebody else, and I'd been replaced, and there was nothing I could do about it. If I had been diagnosed as being ill beforehand, then maybe none of it would have happened, and I would still be dad. But that over a period of time, that wound me down, and I kind of gave up the fight, really, in the end, because I couldn't be this other dad. I couldn't do all the things that the other dad was doing. And it got to a stage where it's like, well, what's the point? And the contact just became less and less, because I was mentally worn down that much. It was something that I couldn't take on. I wasn't in a good place mentally to take on. And as I said, I slowly died inside. I really did. From being quite a sociable person to slowly shutting down and becoming more private, more reclusive. I couldn't put myself anywhere near children after that. I didn't have the heart. I didn't want to know children or anything about children after that. And I still don't to this day. I couldn't do the family bit. Still, I don't fit into that environment, and I know I don't. I don't fit into that dynamic. But still, there was this kind of dad thing going on, and I struggled at that point with my own mental health, because I kept hearing, voices, and what I've worked out some time later was that the voice I was hearing was the 8-year-old who shut down. So I had all of a sudden kind of two kids to cope with. I had the one that was inside, being very demanding 24 hours a day, that I couldn't shake off. I couldn't put somewhere else or give to somebody else. It was here all the time. I want this and I want that, and I want to go to the park, and there would be this kind of dialogue between myself as me and the broken child within. And this young voice would say, I want to do this and I want to do that, and I'd have to cope with behavioural issues that emanated from me. We'd be on buses, say we, on a bus, and it could be miles in the middle of nowhere. You know, we'd go off for a day, and all of a sudden the bus would become packed. And you say, right, I want to get off the bus now. I'm not happy. I want to get off this bus. You know, if we don't get off this bus now, I'm going to hit that person in front. And all this kind of stuff was going on in my head. And I'd have this internal dialogue with myself, saying, no, it's going to be all right. You know, we're getting off in a couple of stops' time. And a couple of times we actually did have to physically get off in the middle of nowhere. And I'd have to sort of have this internal dialogue with myself that, well, you know, that wasn't very good, was it? Because now, you know, we've got to wait another hour, or we've got to walk. So we don't walk. Then after walking a certain way, this voice, sort of internal dialogue voice, would, well, I'm tired now. And I have to go through this process saying, well, you know, you asked to get off the bus. So we had no option but to walk. God, all this dynamic stuff was going on inside my head. And I was still trying to cope with having my own son at the same time. But I would go into cafes, you know, to pacify this inner child. Okay, well, we're going to go and get a glass of milk now. Would you like a glass of milk? I'm talking to myself internally. And then I would go into the cafe and I would, you know, have a hot chocolate and I would order a glass of milk. And I would say to myself, you know, the child, what would you like to eat? Would you like something to eat? Yes, I'd like a cake. So I'd get a cake. And then I don't want this cake, I want that cake. So I'd end up having to the hot chocolate and drink the milk and eat whatever it was for two of us. I mean, this went on for months. And eventually, that internal voice just sort of became quieter and quieter. And I was ready to hit the bottle, seriously ready to hit the bottle. Because all this was, and the only time I'd had this kind of voices before was way back when I couldn't go anywhere where there were lots of people. I couldn't go into shopping centres, I couldn't go into supermarkets because everyone was talking about me. Even somebody on the other side of the road would be talking about me. You know, I could hear them. I thought I could hear them talking about me. My self-esteem was so low that I would, if I went into a supermarket and there was one person in the queue, I would be sweating buckets standing behind that person because I wanted to get out. I couldn't be in that space. You know, shopping was a nightmare, an absolute nightmare for me. I would get into my flat and the first thing I did was lock the windows and throw away the key. Because every time I looked out the window I could see myself falling. I couldn't go over bridges because I could see myself falling over the bridge. Physically, almost feel it. So when this sort of child voice came back, inner child voice, I was sort of got used to hearing a voice. And I worked out that when I did work it out that this was going on, this sort of inner child, I then had to be a parent to that child in a sense and bring the age up to where I was, you know, to allow that child to grow to where I was at that point in my life. And I was then sort of 30. So, Donny, I mean, just mind-blowing stuff. But all the time, there was this sense, whenever things got really tough, I would imagine that I was climbing up the top of a mountain, and that the struggle was actually getting up the mountain. Whatever the problem was, whatever the issue was, the problem was actually getting up the mountain. Because once I knew I'd got to the top of that mountain, I could then see what was on the other side of it. I could see a way forward. And I got pulled back so many times that I really did want to give up. I would phone up Samaritans and all kinds of other services and say, look, I can't do this anymore. I really cannot do it. But at the same time, there was something else saying to me, you can do this. You can get over this. You can get beyond this. It's going to be tough, but it's just a little way to go. And I went a little way, and then it got tougher again. It's like, oh God. But I learnt not to give up and not to give in. If I was focused, I would get there eventually. You know, I don't do victim mentality at all. You know, I never have. I've survived because I've always had the focus to do so. You know, I don't accept victim mentality. I don't accept, oh, woe is me. Oh, you know, how terrible is my life. I've never accepted that. You know, and I've, even in the most difficult circumstances, there's always been that a little bit of positive mental approach that's driven me forward, that's never ever really allowed me to give up. At times when I really did want to give up, and at times when other people gave up on me, completely wrote me off as being beyond any help whatsoever. You know, I've never ever done the victim mentality. I've never blamed anybody. You know, no matter what's happened in my life, I've never blamed my mother or anybody else. You know, because that's just negative. It's just ridiculous. And you end up getting angry and hating people, and it sort of builds up and festers in you like a cancer. It eats you away, and that's never been me. It's never been my focus. I've always considered that to be a cop-out, you know, to blame somebody else all the time for whatever happens to you. You know? And I worked out that it was my life and it was my destiny, and if I was to go through this stuff, then I was to go through this stuff, and I had to accept whatever and keep believing that I would absolutely get through. And slowly but surely I did. You know, I pulled myself back from the brink because I'm just stubborn, you know, and I refuse to give in. But I lost connection with my son, proper connection for many, many years. You know, and I'm still not the best communicator with him. You know, I've kind of explained the way I am and how I feel, and he kind of he understands all that, and he's very, very good at it. You know, he's very good at accepting, very good at understanding. But communication with people I can find very, very difficult in a personal setting. You know, put me in somewhere like Bristol Link or any other organisation, and I'm absolutely fine. I can cope with that. I can deal with that stuff. Breeze it. No worries, no issues at all. I'm very good at that. You know, very, very tunnel vision, very focused on what I need to achieve, where I need to get to with something. Incredible concentration. If I'm hooked into something, nothing else in my life gets in the way. Absolutely nothing. You know, doesn't matter what it is. I'm focused. Nothing gets in the way of it. You know, people can be pushed aside. I don't mean to. It's just my mental way of dealing with things. I don't tend to lose track of people. But when I'm focused on something, that's it. There is absolutely nothing that gets in the way of it. Any project. But through through all the challenges of coping with this child within and getting eventually into Exeter mental health services, then came the point where a very skilled nurse, a modern matron called Andy, who was like a big biker chap, anything less like that, probably a mental health nurse you never would have seen, but you know, he was brilliant. He kind of took me under his wing, and you know, if anybody's ever been in mental health wards, I mean, they are the most boring places, as I may well have mentioned, you know, previously. You end up pacing corridors all day long. No wonder there are people that are in there, you know, with their thumb in their mouth going like that. They're just boring places. You play pool, you have enough of pool and walk up and down the corridor, and then often watch television, and then you watch television for a bit, and then that gets boring and it's back to the pool room. And then you've had enough of that and it's back up and down the corridor. You know. But Andy actually let me take a camera into a mental health ward. I mean, providing I wasn't, you know, photographing patients, we had that understanding. He trusted me enough, and I ended up just taking pictures just to keep myself in check. And through that, he commissioned me to for pictures on the wall of the ward. That was a boost. I mean, that was a real boost. You know, somebody actually believing in me. And that led to an exhibition within the hospital that, you know, reached local press. And from that, I soared. Once I knew what my diagnosis was, and they said, look, you know, you've got borderline personality disorder, you've got histrionic personality disorder. I mean, you know, I had to stop at 3 because I felt I was collecting them like Tesco club card points, you know. It was really mental health that got me into politics, you know, because of all these lovely labels that you give people, you know. Yes, I'm a nutter. Yes, I'm crazy. Yes, I'm mad. You know, yes, I'm all of those labels. I'm very proud of it, you know.